everyone who is back on time, we want to thank you. We'll speak to the others. In the interest of time, I would like that we start with our Q&A session. We have 2 microphones floating around. If you have a question, please raise your hand once the microphone is with you. I would much appreciate if you could state your name. And then we'll launch straight into this. Please. We'll start here in the middle, and then we'll go to the left.
Thank you. Is this on? Testing. Can you guys hear me?
No.
We can hear you, whether it's on or not.
That's alright. I'm a loud talker. I'll make it look like I'm talking.
No.
Put it closer to your face.
Like this.
It's not on. It's not on.
It's got a green light that says that it's on. Okay. So my name is Michael Green. I'm an International Affairs Environmental Studies senior here at Northeastern. My question is for Bill, specifically. Now you talked about the different ideas of a different negotiation needing to happen, and it focusing on development. I see that this is happening within the UN process, specifically with the Green Climate Fund and the fast track finance mechanism within that. The one thing that that I've been told that people on the science or activist side of things seem to forget very quickly is that when we talk about sharing technology, what we're really talking about doing is sharing proprietary information within corporations and businesses. How can we reframe that train of thought so that this is beneficial for the companies to just give up this information and ideas?
You're obviously well informed on these issues. That's good. And it is an important point. The intellectual property debate is absolutely huge. My colleague Kelly Gallagher at Fletcher has studied this pretty carefully, and it turns out she's looked at particularly at China, because we all think China's stealing all our stuff, and then they make it cheaper and they sell it back to us and so forth. There is actually only one documented case where a Chinese company actually did that, and yet they have taken the general knowledge that is out there, say about photovoltaic panels, and hired a really smart guy who was Chinese, but who had been in Australia because he couldn't make it in China. And they said, come back and start a company which came to be known as Suntech, which is now the largest producer of PV panels in the world. And how did they do it? They said, he said he wouldn't come back. And they said, well, we'll capitalize it. He said, well, I just won't come back. They said, $1 billion. He said, I'll come back. He is the world's first solar billionaire himself. And one of the things the Chinese say do very, really well is manufacture stuff. They're not so great at innovation. They're not so great at creating new kinds of solar panels. But and this is what's going to hurt them, because we are going to be moving shortly to a new generation of solar panels, and they'll still be making the old ones. They'll still be making them really well and really cheaply, but they won't be as good as the new ones. But I think what could have been done there would have been to have done some kind of joint ventures, so that basically they don't have to give it up for free. That basically the company that has that technology and the patents on it and everything can get some benefit from it. And I think we are far too protective of our intellectual property. The companies buy up, Hewlett Packard bought up, I forget how many thousands of patents just to have them, to keep them off the market. That doesn't help innovation, that harms it. So we really need to find ways to make it in people's interest. Coming back to the mutual gains argument again, it's got to be in everybody's interest to do this. We need to find some ways to do it. And you're right, that's something that has to be reframed.
Thanks.
Hello, this one is working. Okay, my name is Sergeant. I'm actually a graduate student in energy system. Thank you first of all, of course, for the lecture here. It was very informative. My question to you would be, in your opinion, do you believe that only policies and technology will be able to actually address the climate change? And what you mentioned, Bill, in your, this is actually a symptom to a bigger problem, which I see mostly has to do with actually economical model that's currently in place. And my question basically, do you think it would require some changes on a micro level to existing economical model, on a micro level to personal level? People might have to also change some of their lifestyle, instead of 2 cars, 1 car, smaller houses and stuff like that. So what's your thought? Thank you.
Well, Sonia may want to chime in on this as well, but yes, I think this is not a problem that's going to be solved up here with some grand international agreement. And as Sonia illustrated, there are sub-levels all the way down that have to be engaged, and that, I would argue, she stopped short of getting all the way down to the individual, but I'm sure she'd be willing to go there. I think each one of us needs to think about very carefully, if we really know about this and we really care about it, what are we doing? Now, there are a lot of things that society and the economy make very difficult for us to do things differently, right? Getting around. I mean, Boston's better than most cities in having a public transportation system that's at least partially functional most of the time. A lot of cities, it's not functional at all. I think sure you're all familiar with our local boy from Concord, Henry David Thoreau, who in his book Walden said that he went to the woods to live deliberately, to confront only those facts that were essential to life. That was in the 19th century. And he thought the essential facts of life were you needed to be able to build your own house, grow your own food, and to avoid paying the outrageous fare on this newfangled railroad, walk from Concord to Fitchburg rather than taking the train. And he was concerned about industrialization, and he was concerned about materialism in his time. But I would argue that we need to live deliberately in the 21st century. And climate change is right up there. That's one of the first things we have to be deliberate about. So yes, figuring out what we can do. I built a house, completed it 5 years ago, that is a net zero house in New England. It has solar panels and ground source heat pump and all this wonderful technology. I was able to afford it because I was clever enough to buy a house in the Boston area in 1990 and sell it in 2005, just before the market crashed. Therefore, I had enough. And I basically traded in a 1927 house in the suburbs of Boston for a 21st century house for less money. It performs vastly differently than a leaky old colonial house, which are lovely houses, but they're leaky. So yes, we need to think deliberately. I mean, ask yourself, everything that you do that has to do with energy, everything you have to do with transport, everything you have to do with water. Are there ways that I can do this that would have less of an impact? Whether that means getting some new end-use device or giving up a device. Do I really need a garbage disposal? Right? How about a composter in the backyard? I mean, there are all kinds of things that will reduce your energy use and reduce your emissions.
That all resonates with me. I would say the same thing. There's some places that I really see, I get a lot of hope from. One of them is food systems. Yeah. And watching what's going on, just how people are making decisions around their food. Some of it's trendy, but a lot of it's real. The kinds of ways that people are making decisions on food, the way that the food system is reorganizing to move things less far, to choose things in season, to grow things in ways that use less energy and less fertilizer in particular. That's an example. The other thing that I find incredibly two or three more things, many things actually. The use of networks and networks of groups of people working together. And I don't want to say this is because of the internet, but it certainly is being aided by the internet, by social networks, by our ability to transfer information much more quickly. It's not magic, but it's almost magic. The ability for me to get online and figure out which of my friends is going from one place to another who I could get a ride with, offering rides, finding out what's the least impactful way. We came here together in hybrid. For example. You know, looking at being able to share solutions quickly. I know that I'm not kind of average exactly, but I'm in the middle of dozens of networks now where I can reach out and get a piece of information on the quickest way, best way, lowest carbon way in particular in my circle, to be able to accomplish something. I find that really heartening, and also for the purpose of organizing politically. I think that's very useful. There's no question that we're going to have changes, but some of those changes don't seem to bother people much. You know, when you look at the places that are lowest carbon, Doug Boyce says this all the time, you know, that the lowest carbon places are most of the places with the highest real estate value. You know, living downtown, Beacon Hill, Princeton, New Jersey, New York City. I mean, the per capita emissions of people in those places are low because they can walk to a lot of things, because there are a lot of services nearby. And my husband works at MIT, and I talk to his students a lot, and they don't care about cars anymore. I heard that. I heard a survey that said that. I didn't believe it.
It's true.
But it is really amazing how less important. I'm not telling you all what you should care about or not, but so many of the students that I've talked to, and probably it's the same thing here, feel that, you know, the cars, it's kind of an annoyance. I have to have one sometimes. I need one to do a lot of the things that I want. But I would much rather have a really good computer. I'd much rather have a really good phone and just have access to a car when I need one. And you know, that's, I think, by itself is a revolutionary
It is
change.
revolutionary.
And you know, whether that's going to be the case in a world that's not developed properly for being able to get many places by transit is going to be a challenge for us to continue to try and do infill. But I see lots of signs that could lead us in a direction where those individual choices are actually really nice ones, really good ones that we want.
In the far back
My name is Monica Condura. I'm a PhD student here at Northeastern, and I have a question for the professor. So I recently read that China is going to produce 1,200 coal power plants in the 10 coming years, and be very interested to know what's your reaction with the information, and if you can think of any diplomatic solution to divert them from this clearly unsustainable development.
My reaction to that is, it's horrible, and it isn't going to happen. I really do not believe that China is going to become as intensely coal dependent as all the projections suggest. And I don't know if you've been following the discussions in China today about the terrible air pollution in Beijing, which is partly from coal burning and partly from automobiles. But in a country where every word is censored, if you want to make it public, this is public. And the government is allowing the public discussion. And what that means in China is the government is behind doing something about it. And you know, China, in 2005, China had no wind power industry at all. By 2011, they had more installed wind capacity than any country in the world, including those countries that have been working on it for 30 years. They are now the leading manufacturers and exporters of solar panels. You may not realize it, but they already did this back in the 80s and 90s with refrigerators and air conditioners. You cannot buy a refrigerator and air conditioner, I think, that does not have the guts made in China. How did that happen? If I could just take a minute to do this, I think it's a really interesting story. And actually, I talk about it in this little paper. The Montreal Protocol was set up to protect the ozone layer, and it's very much like we thought we were setting up the Kyoto Protocol. Right? We set targets, we set timetables, we did all these things, but we did something else in that. We turned it into a development treaty. There was an ozone fund that provided money to every developing country that was willing to move out of the ozone-depleting chemicals. Now, all developing countries were going to have to do it 10 years after the developed countries did. So by 2010, all developing countries were supposed to be out. Developed countries, originally it was 2000. We've moved it back to 1995, and developed countries were out. We went from a peak of, what was it, 1.4 billion pounds a year in the world in 1987 to 0 in 2010. Well, we helped China make something other than the ozone-depleting chemicals for their refrigerators, and they wanted to have a refrigerator in every kitchen. That was their goal as a government. Well, once they started doing that, why make refrigerators in China that deplete the ozone layer for another 10 years, when in fact we could then be making them for the rest of the world, which China, as I said, is a great manufacturing country, which they did, and they couldn't export the dirty ones to Europe and the United States, but they could do the clean ones. So they did the clean ones for us. They did the clean ones for themselves. They're the leading manufacturer of refrigerators. This is the reason that China is changing, is because they are discovering that these clean technologies actually are economically beneficial to them. It helps their markets. It helps their exports. And I think that's going to drastically transform things. They're not going to want more dirty coal plants. In fact, they're shutting down more dirty coal plants than we have been, although we're beginning to catch up. But 5-6 years ago, they were shutting down old coal plants. And even when they built new ones, they were so much cleaner and more efficient than the ones we have. So even their coal plants are better than our coal plants. But the new technologies they're doing are really going to take off. So I am skeptical that China is going to become this coal sink that's going to drop us into the black hole of global warming.
My name is Rob Cannon. I'm a teacher and professor. I have a question for you. When Roger Fisher wrote Getting to Gas, he actually got a co-author by the name of William Ury.
Yes.
William Ury, a few years later, wrote a book called The Power of the Positive No, where he pointed out that actually getting to gas is pretty simple. All you have to do is cave to what the other side says. And that the key is to be able to say no first until you get to the right yes. So my question to you is, in the context of our discussion, what do we have to say no to first?
Good question. I think we have to say, first of all, in the United States, we have to say no to the fossil fuel industry. Because I will tell you, the fossil fuel industry has been playing dirty on this issue in an incredible way. They have been putting millions of dollars into discrediting climate science. And some of the people who are doing that then turn around and give lots of money to universities in this city, in this area, who then take that money from these people who have been disparaging real science. I don't know how they can do that with their conscience, but they do. As you know, there's a campaign right now to get university students to get the universities to divest of fossil fuel stocks. Nice symbolic thing to do. It wouldn't really affect them adversely that much. Much more importantly would be get universities to quit using fossil fuels themselves. The only way we're going to beat the fossil fuel industry is basically to make it irrelevant. Now, this is happening with coal in the United States right now for a whole variety of reasons that no one anticipated 5 years ago. You know, the coal industry in the United States used to, as recently as 2003, was producing 51% of the electricity in this country. By the end of this last quarter of 2012, it was 36%. That's a precipitous decline. The coal industry is panicked. And so they want us to build them, to use taxpayer money to build them trains to ship all the coal they can't sell in this country to the West Coast so they can sell it to China. I hope we don't do that. You know, that would be worse than the XL pipeline, I think, in terms of global emissions. But the coal industry has been worse than the tobacco industry ever was in the days of deception and so forth. And I really think we have to call them out, and we just have to defy them, and we have to put in place actions that are going to make a difference. The reason that Massachusetts and Vermont can do things is we don't have a coal industry here. It helps a lot. It's a lot harder when you're in Indiana or Ohio or someplace that has coal mines. California doesn't have any coal mines, or for a while they have oil refineries and they've cleaned those up a lot. But that's why we're going to be able to make progress in some states, but not all states, for a while. It's going to be uneven, I guess. But I think we really have to take on the fossil fuel industry and basically. I think the Republicans in the House of Representatives are right when they say that looks like there's a war on coal. Well, there is not a war on coal, which is unfortunate in my view. But we really should try to find, not have a war on coal, but really find a way that the coal industry can make a transition to something else, and that coal miners can have a transition to a different job. It's not that we need to knock them out. What we need to do is basically to build them up so that they can do something else. So that's what I would argue is perhaps the highest priority.
We have time for one more question.
It's been great. Thank you for coming today. My name is Warren Higgis. I'm Northeastern alum and now current research associate at the Institute for International Development. And I guess my question is for Sonia. I've heard some rumblings from environmental groups about something called fee and dividend model as an alternative to cap and trade, now that there's not so much headway being made at that the federal level. And I'm not too sure what it is, and I was wondering if maybe you were aware of it, you could describe it and maybe explain to what extent it's more pragmatic or there's any momentum behind it. Thank you.
You want to talk about it? I mean, the idea of buying fee and dividend is that, in a sense, it's a carbon tax. So but what do you do with the tax? What you do is you refund it to all taxpayers. So basically, it could be either every month, or every 6 months, or every year. You get a check from the federal government for your 311 millionth share of however much money was taken in, let's say, in the previous month or 6 months or whatever the period is. And what it would do, the tax would be, you would see it because it would appear probably at the wholesale level for oil. So it would raise the price of gasoline, but it wouldn't be an extra gas tax at the pump per se, but it would raise the price. Increasing the cost of fuel means we would all probably use less of it because we do respond to price. And then, but you say, well, but the argument against that has always been, well, it's unfair to poor people. Of course, the poorest people don't have cars. But the next level down, the poor people do have cars, and they need them to get to their jobs and so on and so forth. What this does, if you look at it, and the analyses that have been done, is most poor people would receive more money than they spend extra on fuel. Wealthier people would get less money back, so it would be progressive. Reason being that wealthy people usually spend more on energy than poor people. But everybody would get the same amount back. So there's some break point. I don't know what level it would be. If you make $72,000 a year, that's the break point, or 57, or whatever. It'll be some number, and that will change over time. But it's an interesting idea, and it gets away from, I don't trust the government to use this money well. Right? So I guess I'm willing to support it because it's going to come back to me. I know it's coming back to me. Anyway, so it's an intriguing idea.
All right, I would like to thank our speakers and all of you for lively discussion, for wonderful presentations. I'm, as always, heartened by the fact that in what could otherwise be a fairly dismal topic, you can find new ways of addressing the challenges, trying to find new ways of actually seeing what's the climate challenge as a climate opportunity, an opportunity to improve efficiencies, and an opportunity to improve lives and livelihoods. And so, in that vein, I want to thank all of you.
If you are interested in this event on the 25th, which is a Friday, on the back of here is our website, and you can go to that website and get all the information there. So if you have one of these, you can get that.
And then in this series, next week we'll have 3 speakers who will focus on economic and business-related issues around climate change. Mindy Luber, who's the president and founding board member of Ceres, and also they're in charge of the Investor Network and Climate Risk. We'll have Mark Buckley, who's the vice president of environmental affairs at Staples, and Lee Kane, who is the eco czar, forager at Whole Foods Market. All of those will bring slightly different but complementary perspectives from the business world to the climate topic, and I welcome you to participate in that as well. And between now and then, we should stay warm, dry, and have a great weekend.